I think smiling never hurts.
Okay, testing. I think we're ready to begin. Hello, and welcome to Flowing Forward, a virtual panel discussion developed in conjunction with the Site Gallery's exhibition Be Water, Wo Lei Flow. My name is Francisca Rudolph. Most of you watching may know me as Fran, and I'm the Director of Administration at Site Galleries this academic year of 2020-2021. On behalf of Site, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us today. Site Galleries is a student-run organization here at the School of Art Institute of Chicago and is dedicated to the exhibition of student work. Last spring semester, we hosted the Be Water exhibition in our Sharp Gallery in downtown Chicago. The show presented a range of multimedia works by 6 Hong Kong artists who considered their home from a distance, the importance of global solidarity and struggle, and the preciousness of truth and dissent. In conjunction with the gallery, the artists hosted a public gathering that reclaimed the organic social activity of convening by inviting people to come together and view the work on display. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the exhibition was cut short, as well as a panel discussion intended to take place on campus. As we shift into a digital realm, we're grateful that we are able to provide this space to hear directly from the artists about their work, to reflect on the exhibition, and discuss questions from viewers. We hope that you will join us in respectful dialogue today by submitting a question or comment for our artists and panelists to respond to. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Caroline, curator of Be Water and a 2019 graduate of SAIC's Arts Administration and Policy MA program.
Thank you, Fran. Hello, everybody. I just want to say that we are incredibly thankful to be able to finally have this conversation together, even if we can't be with you all in person. This has always been an integral desire for the show to be a conversation. So we thank everyone who has worked so hard to allow this to happen, who participated in the exhibit, in the assembly, and for all of you turning in wherever you are. I'm going to just briefly introduce the artists of the Be Water exhibition, the panelists who will be sharing today, and a bit about how and why this show came together. This exhibit was really an attempt to voice a personal response to what in many ways was a geopolitical spectacle. And as we were grappling with what we're seeing here in Chicago, as Hong Kong's long-standing social and political issues completely burst open. As artists and students, this show was a lane we felt was useful in dealing with where our place was in all of this, with all of our precarity and privilege, both, but also as a way to reach out. We really wanted to be able to talk about all of the things that are beneath the surface. These experiences can feel so incredibly isolating, but of course, they're not spontaneous and they're not isolated. They're deeply connected to a long legacy of struggle, not just in Hong Kong, but globally. And this has been exceedingly clear in the era of COVID-19. And as we see the struggle for Black liberation here in the US continue. So today we have 4 of our team present. Gabby Wu, the painter, Winnie Wong, is a mixed media artist and art therapy student. Ken Lam is a sound artist, and Chrissy Lamb's a fiber artist. And they'll also be here for the Q&A portion if there's any questions they can answer. And our panelists today will be starting the conversation for us from their different points of knowledge and practice. Jennifer Lee will be presenting and also moderating the discussion. She's an assistant professor in art history, theory, and criticism here at SAIC. She has done so much to help us make sure we could put this program together as thoughtfully as possible. And her work takes an interdisciplinary approach to the study of modern and contemporary East Asian art. And she has a deep commitment to broadening the possibilities of a transnational perspective. Sonia Chang graduated from SAIC with a BFA and BA in Visual Critical Studies. She is a part of Lausan Collective, which is an independent collective of writers, translators, artists, and organizers working to build solidarity on the transnational left, and has been doing extensive coverage and analysis of the movement on the ground in Hong Kong and connecting to events and grassroots movements as they've been happening around the world. And finally, we have Wen Yao, who is joining us from Hong Kong. She's also spent some time in Chicago as a Fulbrighter at Northwestern. She is a cross-media artist, researcher, curator, writer, and her recent work has been with performance and live art and time-based media, and often grapples with cultural difference and intimacy in public space. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thanks so much, Caroline, for those introductory words, and thanks to Fran. So I'll be taking over just as moderator for the discussions today, and this is in addition to my role as panelist. So before I get into sharing my own panelist notes, I want to point out a couple of logistics and to say that the live chat on YouTube is intended to be a space for your engagement. Thanks to all those tuning in. And I would say that our main aim today is to have open and respectful dialogue to deepen understandings of viewpoints that may prove to be quite diverse. We encourage everyone to engage in discussion through the live chat via the YouTube link. So if you're watching on the SAIC website or on Facebook, you can go to YouTube via the pop-out. This is meant to be a space to share responses and thoughts with each other during the panel presentations, as well as to engage in some conversation with the artists. We will be able to view your questions more or less in real time. As with any event, we all ask that you maintain respect for your fellow community members as well as for our guests. Event participants are really diverse in their experiences, so please remain respectful of the different perspectives that they bring, and do refrain from malicious or offensive speech on the chat. Otherwise, we'll have to turn off the chat. We will have a Q&A period open to everyone at the end of this presentation, roughly around 11 a.m. So there will be 30 minutes to try to get to as many questions as we can, both that were sent in ahead of time as well as those that come up in today's chat. Okay, without further ado, I will now transition us to our panel presentations, and I'll be the first presenter, so that's pretty convenient. Now, by way of getting started, I'd like to take this opportunity to set the stage today for our conversation by offering a brief account of the circumstances that inspired us to organize this panel. And I think this is maybe useful for anyone tuning in who may not have seen the exhibition of the artists and curator from last winter at SAIC, which, as Fran mentioned, closed prematurely owing to the pandemic. So all of the events that have come up since last winter have really shifted the approach that we've brought to put this panel together. So turning back to that point in time for just a few moments, I wanted to say that many of us at SAIC both witnessed and took part in a major series of events that were sparked by the installation and the opening of the exhibition titled Be Water, Wole Flow. And this was in the last days of February, the first days of March. Members of our community responded really strongly to the show. Some responses offered words of support, whereas other responses posed strong challenges to the artists, the organizers, the gallery directors, among others. I recall in this time being struck by a bittersweet irony of seeing the protest of protest unfold here at this art school in Chicago. To be slightly more specific, and I will, let me share my slides. I have a few.
It seems we have lost Jenny. We will just wait a minute for her to reconnect.
Hi all, did I get kicked off? Can you see me now? Technical difficulties. Love it. Okay, let me try one more time to share my slides, and if it doesn't work, I'll just talk without them. Okay, so I'm going to put this into presentation mode. Would somebody let me know if you can see this image of the Lenin Wall from the Be Water exhibition? Could you unmute yourself and let me know?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I wanted to say that on the face of it, superficially speaking, when this Be Water exhibition opened here at SAIC, it seemed as though members of our school community were protesting works of protest art. Or if I could put this in a slightly different way, it seemed as though students and other members of the community were demanding greater accountability of creative practice that is inspired and driven by the ongoing protest movement in Hong Kong. I think that was a surface impression, one that was easily conveyed, that many of our community talked about. But looking more closely, it struck me that the reality of what was going on was surprisingly far more complicated. And I think this is evidenced by the Lenin walls set up at the outer entryway of the gallery space that I'm showing you here. The wall, in the manner of democracy walls and Lenin walls from decades past, was papered over within days of the exhibition's opening. It was covered with posters, as you see, printed manifestos, flyers, and photocopied class readings. I even saw a page from the English translation of Lucian's famous preface pasted here. All of this in addition to the multicolored sticky notes that became so recognizable in the 2014 Hong Kong umbrella movement, which was initiated by the Beijing government's decision that year to implement reforms to the Hong Kong electoral system. So just to remind everybody of the way that social space in Hong Kong was transformed in 2014 with the social movement, I would say that the post-it covered Lenin walls did return in force in Hong Kong a few years later, starting last summer, with the protests rising against the extradition bill initiated by Beijing to allow the extradition of criminal suspects from Hong Kong to China. And this second wave of protest carried through the summer of 2019 and continues today, albeit in altered form amid the global pandemic, and also in light of the national security law passed at the end of just last month, which criminalizes acts of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces in Hong Kong. Okay, so bringing it back to Chicago while I wrap up. As you might expect, Lenin walls encompass a diversity of expression. They can be laudatory, critical, rather silly, but also quite serious. And in order to access and engage with all these layers, you need to get really, really close. Would you agree? You need to get in there, nose to the wall, to sort through it all, this barrage of non-systematic information. It's really hard for the mind to process all at once. And getting close, you then see how the messages are not only multifarious, but they are also coded. So I wanted to just take a few minutes, a couple minutes, to bring us through a few examples of the postings on the Lenin Wall at SAIC. You see these coded collages of image, text, illustration. Some of it does require inside knowledge to decode, not just knowledge of Chinese language and Sinophone orality, but also understanding of memes, viral references, slang, and other colloquialisms. So here, this example, this Miss Lonely Hearts example, kind of disarmed me in the midst of the more overtly political postings. A curt scrawl on a piece of masking tape, seeking a mate for swift marriage, neither house nor car is necessary. Or here, a bit more playful, we see a not so subtle reference to the art world Banana Gate that unfolded last December. I'm not sure how many of you tuning in know about Maurizio Catalan's Comedian, which is shown to the right. It's an artwork consisting of a banana duct taped to the gallery wall at Art Basel 2019. This unicorn of the art world, so-called, actually sold for $120,000 and was written about widely at the time. That event is wittily reprised at SAIC, but with black tape, replacing the silver duct and invoking, I think, very clearly the Hong Kong protest colors, as well as invoking possibly a more critical symbolism now that the banana is relocated to this art world adjacent context. It seems that politics get added that are less seen, I think, in global contemporary art spheres. And quickly, a last example. Here, someone pasted a takeout menu, a plastic fork, and a mournful illustration to the wall. Appended, you see a message expressing the longing of mainland Chinese, and I'm decoding the metaphors in the message, the longing of mainland Chinese to play together harmoniously with Hong Kongers and Taiwanese alike. This posting is evocative, I think, not only of some primordial and hotly contested sense of unity, but also it invokes the shared grounds on which such desires can get expressed here and now. That is, through the mass disposable plasticware and bilingual Chinatown takeaway menus on which international students from Asia rely here in North America. So these shared grounds, in other words, are diasporic and transnational, as are the issues we're discussing today. Okay, so by way of wrapping up, I'd like to, before introducing our next speaker, wrap up by saying that the organizers of the exhibition, as Caroline mentioned, have always conceived the conversation around their work and with our invited panelists to be one that goes beyond easily drawn divisions. They want a conversation that forges ties and possibly innovative modes of communication between and among individuals or collectives who are faced with the unbearable experience of social inequity and systematic adversity, wherever this takes shape. For my part as an educator, I'm always thinking about something that I hope we might address today, which is how can Hong Kong, or how is Hong Kong seen today? How is Hong Kong talked about in the news or on that Lenin wall in the Sharp building? And do these views bear any resemblance to the way Hong Kong should be talked about in the present day? Especially amid this moment of shared emergency, both the emergency of the global pandemic, as well as the social turmoil that we're all facing in and outside of the US, in and outside of Hong Kong. I welcome Sonia and also Wanyao to take it up. Sonia, may I please invite you to speak?
Hi all. 1 second while I put my slides up. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? I will assume so.
Yes.
Okay. Thank the Water team, site team, and the art history department for letting me be a part of this panel. I graduated last year and mostly focused on sculpture and VCS, Fiction and Critical Studies, during my time in SAIC. I'm currently a member of Lausanne Collective, which I'll be introducing shortly, and I'll also be talking a little about a Hong Kong/diaspora focused exhibition I did at site in 2017. In the past year, numerical combinations such as 612, 721, 831, 101 had evolved into signifying something extremely heavy and significant for Hong Kongers, each to its own merit, representing key events that happened during the ongoing Hong Kong movement. Today is July 21st, marking the 1-year anniversary to the Jinlong attack, and coincidentally, when our panel is happening. Last July 21st, I think I'm reading a little too fast. I will assume that I'm reading a little too fast.
You can slow down a little bit.
Today is July 21st, and I've said that already. Anyway, so last July 21st, an armed mob of triad members of over 400 men dressed in white t-shirts attacked civilians with steel rods and rattan canes. The mob attacked passengers in the Yunnan metro station in Hong Kong, including kids, elderly, pregnant women, journalists, and lawmakers, basically anyone you can think of. And that night, the Hong Kong police turned a blind eye and walked away when people were crying for help at arm's length. No arrests were made, and the mounting evidence of corruption and misconduct by the Hong Kong police had proved to Hong Kong and the world that we just simply cannot trust the police force anymore. This is something we, or the general public, had not anticipated back then. This is shocking for a city that had formerly prided itself as one of the world's safest cities. As someone who was physically away from what I call home, and witnessing these events online in tiny monitors with over 12 hours time differences, it was a very hard to digest and helpless feeling. This is when a bunch of us Hong Kong diasporans of some sort, spread across the US, Canada, and the UK, found each other online. Amongst us, there were writers, researchers, activists, and artists, and like a bunch of nerds, we put together articles on a site we created to engage with the city's political struggles from a diasporic perspective, and launched about a month later in early September, which is what is known as Lausanne Collective right now. In the few months since our official launch, we had put out original writings and translated articles on the movement in different languages, from Chinese and Bahasa Indonesian into English or Spanish or Korean and vice versa. We have hosted a bunch of events including panel discussions, public and private workshops with other organizing groups in New York, Seattle, Hong Kong, London, and Toronto, to name a few. And earlier this year in January, we organized a panel discussion in Verso Books with Alex Chow, one of the 4 former student leaders from the 2014 Umbrella Movement. We also had members who spoke at film festivals, and in December 2019, we were invited by Paola Antonelli to contribute and attend the 34th Research and Development Salon at MoMA on the topic of anger. It was a very short notice invitation, but we created a 105 seconds video in the theme of collective anger in response to the curatorial statement addressing global dissatisfaction with their governments. And I quote, "From discord within the current American administration to rising hostility within France, Germany, Greece, Iraq, and Lebanon, anger fueled by Brexit, the Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill proposed by the Hong Kong government, Catalan separatists, rising Hindu nationalism in India, and recent protests in Chile, etc., etc." Basically, I would imagine the curators were thinking, who on earth is angry right now? Hong Kongers. Let's get a group of them, ideally one based in the US involved as well. But nonetheless, it was a terrific opportunity for Lausanne to address the ongoing movements in Hong Kong in an institutional setting and furthermore through an art lens. They filmed the event on their site, and I will somehow link it a bit later, but feel free to watch it online if you have time. It was pretty wild because the panel coordinator were trying to assign one of the panelists to pretend to be a representative from the police department and to respond to some of their Q&As. But anyway, so now I'll talk about something else. In the spring of 2017, Ali, another VCS alum and also a part of Lausanne, and I co-created an exhibition called 5354, Neither Here Nor There, at the same spot where the Be Water exhibition took place. It was part of an ode to the Umbrella Movement in 2014, where both me and my co-curator had missed as we were in school in the US, and also an exploration of the transnational collective actions and its translation of Hong Kong, Chinese, and East Asian identities after the urgency of Hong Kong's electoral anxieties in 2017. 5354, a homonym to Msa Mse. It's a phrase that is impossible to be fully encapsulated in English, and roughly translates into neither here nor there, something in between. We networked around shared motifs of diaspora and disappearance, consumption and exchange for everyday Hong Kong-style objects and symbols. Through the exhibition, we explored what it meant for us to be a diasporic Hong Konger in a culture that's fundamentally transnational at its core, given its history of being a British colony. Keeping in mind the controversies surrounding the Be Water exhibition in the SAIC community, especially amongst other fellow Chinese international students during this politically sensitive and vulnerable climate, hate speeches and non-letters demanding the show to be taken down, to name a few, the atmosphere differences between the 5354 show in 2017 and the Be Water exhibition in 2020 is striking. Being able to do self-explorations at our own pace and slowly think about global solidarity feels like a luxury when I'm looking at the Be Water exhibition now. It feels like as if we went to a beach when there wasn't a pandemic versus if we go to a beach during a pandemic. One that we were able to quote-unquote have fun in versus one with so much precarity that merits auto-censorship from the mere sight of it. It is a bit hard to recall what our plans were for these 3 months had we not been on a lockdown, and even harder to imagine a world without last year's movements as a Hong Konger. But although neither here nor there it is, the transnationality and the so-called Hong Kong spirit is what made us us and what kept the movement going. Wait. Oh, yeah, I forgot to show this. Anyway. And I'll wrap up my presentation here now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I know you have to cover, as does our next speaker, a great deal of information in a small amount of time. So I welcome Wen Yao. Would you please join us with your addition? Remember to unmute.
Sorry, I forgot to turn on my mic. Okay, so you can hear me now, right? And you can see my slides. All right, thanks for having me on this panel. I would like to maybe answer Jenny's question that was posed at the beginning by asking more questions, like why are we doing art and how can we respond to the social turmoil through art making? So let me introduce myself first. My name is Wen Yao, an artist, researcher based in Hong Kong. And quite a lot of my work is socially or politically engaged and concerned. And I feel somehow privileged to have chances to show my work abroad, and therefore feel obliged to give voices to Hong Kong's worsening situation from time to time. And today I would like to share with you the struggle that I experienced, especially over the past year when doing socially or politically engaged work. The struggle has been intensified now as anxiety and fear amplified by the national security law newly imposed in Hong Kong by the PRC government. From the picture here, you can see my performance in Leipzig last November on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the fall of Berlin Wall. Leipzig was one of the starting points of social movement that took down the GDR government in 1989. So the performance was actually part of my work presented in the exhibition The Ends of Freedom last fall at Hall 14. For this installation, I compiled videos and images collected from the internet and some fellow artists on the the anti-extraditional protests in Hong Kong. There were about 2,000 mini posters pasted on the wall, plus around 9 video works produced by artists, plus a few dozens of short clips that I collect from internet. In November, I traveled to Leipzig to presented a live performance. Indeed, I felt very overwhelmed by the protests that had happened for 5 months already then, and also by the physical violence that I witnessed on site or via media, as well as the structural violence and social injustice that I see every day. My performance makes reference to protests in Leipzig back in 1989 and sought to rethink about the dialectics of activism in a critical manner. Strangely, a few days after I returned Hong Kong, the police started raiding university campuses, and I felt even more speechless and lost in words to express the rage at heart. This is another performance I presented in Vancouver at an earlier stage of the protest. About a week after the storming of the legislative chamber in Hong Kong. I tried to compare the 2014 umbrella movement and 2019 protests in Hong Kong. The blind walking in school uniform make reference to a lecture performance I staged during the class boycotts in 2014. I created a mini lantern wall, really mini, at the end of my performance and invited members of the audience to post their responses to my performance or what's going on in Hong Kong. One of the difficulties in presenting this work was to respond to a volatile situations responsibly. I had to handle my emotions conscientiously and beware of not taking advantages of the audience empathy with Hong Kong's situation. I sought to create pieces of work not for propaganda, but rather to transform my personal experiences into reflective dialogues. And this was a performance I staged in Venice right after the occupied site was evacuated by the police in Hong Kong during the 2014 umbrella movement. I was doing an autoethnography then in the protest as part of my doctoral research. This work was about the harm I experienced by the government's unresponsiveness, as well as the internal struggles among protesters. At the end of my performance, I burst into tears and could not calm down for half an hour. This may seem self-therapeutic. Meanwhile, the audience felt my complex feelings as they could not read this Chinese slogan I repeatedly wrote on the wall at all. So actually, this is kind of like they really feel my feeling. And I was really impressed by that. Blindfold is probably one of the signatures of my performance work. I joined a few protests blindfolded since 2014, right before the Occupy happened. And the last blind walking protest I made was last April. I like the symbolic action of navigating in the dark. It takes lots of courage at the beginning to start with. And also it takes a lot of trust that I have to put in others around me when I walk along. And I was in a symposium in Bern in 2018 presenting a lecture performance on my doctoral research. The organizer ran to me after my performance and reported that there were two Chinese-looking girls taking lots of pictures of me during my presentation. They worried that I was spied and asked them to delete the photos. When he told me, I laughed it off. But then later on, I realized that it may not be a joke. I was not sure whether they followed me all the way to Switzerland or they were spies stationed in Switzerland anyway, checking all Chinese-looking people. But then what could I do? Stop them, warn them, or beat them up? This incident appeared to be a forecast of what happened in 2008, 2019 and on. Actually, since 2005, I have taken part in various performance art festivals in mainland China. In these festivals, presenting work in front of plainclothes policemen is nothing new. I learned a lot from other mainland artists how to play around with that. Sometimes I make parodic work to touch on social political issues and even direct them in my live performances. This was a work I presented in Guangzhou when Liu Xiaobo was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Indeed, I was checked up by plainclothes policemen who gave away actually a design studio name card. They will not tell you that they're policemen, but you can tell they're police. But luckily, I sneak away from them afterwards. Honestly, I feel anxious. I can feel the fear in the air, especially now. There may be spies, there may be secret police everywhere. You never know. However, I know I have to keep up the faith and my belief in freedom and overcome the fear bred by authoritarianism. I strongly believe that I produce work for people who believe in freedom, but not for those who deprive us of it. So to wrap up, I would like to share with you a quote from a Korean-born American writer, Matthew Salesses. Art was a way to encourage dissent among those who needed encouragement. The characters in a Falak Pavel play can never convince the secret police. To try is only to convict oneself further. What is left is for the people who know themselves not to be free, to nourish the freedom inside themselves. This is the way artists help take down a regime. I hope maybe this can open up to more discussion and somehow answer the question that I asked at the beginning. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Guanyao, for sharing all of this information about what you've been up to. I would like to really extend us into the next section of our event, and quickly we will get to having our discussion. But before doing so, by way of transitioning, and as I'm thanking Wenyao and Sonia for your words, I'd like to welcome another panelist, Winnie Wong, to share a poem. The poem title is Waking Up from a Bathtub. Winnie?
Damp and muggy. 2/3 of the naked body submerged in the water. The air is noticeably thick, expanding the rib cage, forcing more air into the lungs. Foggy vision, packed with steam, wrinkled skins loosely wrap around the fingers. Competing for oxygen, suffocating, bubbles escaping from the surface, simmering. Is it boiling? Leap out of the top, the only tiny window above the head, pushing. Fresh air does not come in. Instead, emerges the sound of sirens, as if a solo is being played at the highest pitch that can only be heard by the most intelligent. The orchestra picks up the tempo from adagio to allegro. The heart is racing, the chest is tight. Whoever is coughing in the concert hall might be in trouble. Slowly, steadily, let the body slip back into the water. Cautiously, quietly, no ripples triggered. The lips, the ears, the eyes, then the top of the head, melting into the water, disappears from the entrance to the muted underworld. Remains the heart, the pounding sound, disturbingly loud, as if the body is signaling the urgency for the next inhale. Open lips, only to realize the air is on the other side. Sunk to the bottom, cracks open the last rising bubble. The stage starts dimming. Like a firefly in the summer evening, the bathtub stoppers begins to glow, loosen up, dances into the sky. The current rushes through the tiny hole, echoing through the drains without skipping a beat, longing to unite the same ocean flow. The orchestra picks up the tempo from allegro to presto. The heart is tracing, the chest is tight. Whoever is coughing in the concert hall might be in trouble, except the hall has no wall. The stage is everywhere. Spotlight lands on the naked body, re-emerged, unfolding like a crumbled paper in reverse. The body stands up, dripping. The heartbeat synchronizes, beating, waving the baton in the air. Music emerges from everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winnie. It's incredibly moving words on top of moving words, as we've been hearing so far from our panelists. I would like to welcome our panelists and the Be Water team, the artists and curator, to please come together, and we will have a brief conversation before opening up our discussion to Q&A from viewers online. So maybe by way of getting started and talking a bit about your work, I'd like to invite you to, shift this perspective or continue to really talk about your personal experience and the views that you bring to your practices as artists, as interdisciplinary artists, I think in each case. And one way of initiating a quick discussion among us is to bring up the tension that seems to be coming out in each person who has spoken so far. That is the tension between, on the one hand, a sense of emotion, a sense of anxiety, as Wenyao mentioned, fear, and even rage, that somehow has to come out, that has to find some sort of release in expression. And on the other hand, the seeking of some podium or platform for representation, for instance, in the institutional spaces of MoMA or other art world spheres that might lend a certain, not only legitimacy, but possibly a certain security and stability to the presentation of this emotion. So, we have to deal with that pressure, right? Between maybe having something that is a legitimate kind of expression of activist voice, and on the other hand, something that can be supported and structured by the institutions of museums and educational apparatuses. So I was wondering what everyone might think about how you encounter this experience of making work and maybe the problems that you have to overcome in order to make the work you do. Would anyone like to speak to that? You can also ask your own questions.
I think I was talk first. My name is Keen. If you look at the presentation right now, you can see just change. The black curtain box is my piece, and what is inside is a collage of video composition that I compose that make really disturbing sound and strobing video that I generate through video news I collect on the internet of the Hong Kong news protest. Specifically, it's about the I will try to target the issue of the police brutality, like when they use strobe light to kind of suppress the journalists, the way they try report the news and what they see. So I think when I build this work, I try not to center the piece. People will think like I'm trying to target Hong Kong police and they are just bad. They're like try to be propaganda saying like this is no good. I think what I want to do is why I picked this subject is also a thing I think a lot of people even in the US can relate. And as we see in the past couple months and weeks, police brutality is a global issue. And it's not just like what we see in Hong Kong, but also it's in everywhere. It's really sad. And that is why I want to use this work that more people can resonate and it's not just target in Hong Kong. And because one of the reason why we create this show is also like create dialogue, create conversation with more people, not just people that, oh, I know what's going on in Hong Kong, so have a talk, but also with people that don't specifically know what is happening in Hong Kong. I want to like have, when I build my work, I try to have more, like a bigger pictures, so more people can also be part of the conversation when I do this work.
This brings up a really interesting question for me anyway. I'm not sure if you'd all like to elaborate a bit on how you're talking about propaganda and how maybe you're all thinking about it in slightly different ways, although my understanding is that the term has actually been revitalized in a slightly new form in Hong Kong since 2019. Is that correct? And if so, I mean, Wen Yao, you were also making a point that what you're doing, at least in one of your performances, is not meant to be propaganda so much as I wrote down a transferring of personal experience into dialogue or a transformation of that. So how do you, and I think this is a question that pertains to activism infused art practice for everyone, but how do you negotiate that issue of activist creation and of propaganda production?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, for your question or response. And from time to time, I'm reserved to do work with very strong political message. It means that actually I don't want to use my art as a protest. I'm clear that when I blindfold myself and join the protest, that's my intervention, right? And I make a statement because I pose a question: why should I join the protest? Indeed, when I first joined it in 2000, when I first did it in 2014, and then when I do my work, actually from time to time, I discuss with the curator and try to know, okay, what's going on. I know to know the setting of the exhibition, etc. And at the same time, I try to understand the context where my work is being presented, like the work in Leipzig or even the work in Vancouver, in Bern. I try to, I think that the one in Leipzig is especially like really research based. And I did a lot of research and tried to understand more about what's going on or what happened in 1989. And interestingly, actually, I even visited the former headquarters of secret police, things like that, and even the church where all these people gather every Monday. That's where the protest started. When I do all these things, actually, I think the reason why I'm reserved about like doing work with strong political message is that if I just care about myself or care about Hong Kong, I cannot start a really meaningful dialogue or engaging dialogue with the audience. I feel that actually like if once I open up myself and try to understand others better, I can really I can kind of like make a more constructive dialogue. And that's why I say it's a reflexive dialogue that I try to pose in my work or transform my personal experience into a reflexive or more reflexive dialogues.
Thank you so much, Wen Yao. I want to open up the kind of discussion to others if you'd like to initiate your own questions. So please don't hesitate to jump in. But maybe I can also sort of branch this out a bit and ask, speaking to the personal, ask you how it is that your own experiences are really having some kind of central role in the decisions you're making about what you're making. So to make a political piece of art, an overtly politicized artwork, what is it that comes from your own kind of personal engagement with the world around you? Would anyone like to speak about the personal experience informing your practice?
Yes, I think I can jump in. Hi, my name is Percy. I'm one of the artists here. Going back to what Wenya was just mentioned earlier, that she said that she didn't attempt to make art about politics, or she didn't attempt to make political art. I mean, or not use art as a protest. I think for me, when I hear that, it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of like a contrast to what I am doing in this exhibition, that I do see my piece in this exhibition. It's a way, or it's my way of protest. Since I was not physically in Hong Kong, and I really wanted to do something or like try to find my role in the in this protest. So I was just figuring out the whole semester what could I do in response to what is going on in Hong Kong. And the piece here that I made, it's called very literal, Stand with Hong Kong, which I have woven 100 newspaper front pages, which is a last object that I took when I returned to Chicago last summer from Hong Kong, and as a way to express my emotion and my feelings about this protest. I think, and also going back to the primary question that Jenny was asked about, what challenging part it's that I'm facing is, I think, the time-consuming part and the labor-intensive efforts that I dedicated into this piece is killing. And it's very challenging, which I basically spend the whole day from 7 in the morning until like 9 o'clock at night, like weaving strictly, one by one, and each woven newspaper took approximately like an hour to finish. And in this process, I also do see the relationship between the nature of protests, which is not easy, and you need to insist, and you need to have patience. So I think this was the most challenging part for me while I was doing this piece.
And I also want to jump into that question. I think, yeah, thanks for Percy sharing. I think my take on how it is a kind of emotional expression is like really different from the direction that Percy's taking. For me, I feel like it is more personal. It's almost like through the act of painting, I'm actively trying to connect myself to the actual events that are happening, because I know that being here in Chicago and the kind of physical distance between me and some of my friends who might be actually in the protests, who might actually have been arrested by the police, just being here, I think, like at a certain point, it's like uncertainty or not knowing what I could do to, to like express my opinions and what I could do to help the situation. And I almost feel like it's like painting is a way to sort of thinking about these spaces that were depicted in news images, like these interiors of train stations where I was seeing pictures of them with tear gases and like police on social media or a lot of news platform. And when I look at those images, I'm very aware of me being in Chicago, and I think about my personal experiences in these spaces when I was in Hong Kong, growing up in Hong Kong, and how like I could actually locate where this specific pillar in this image is in the station, and how like my experience of navigating through space plays into thinking and perceiving these protest images. And I think for me that is, I don't know, it's almost a kind of I don't know, it's almost a kind of defense mechanism for like, I don't want to say guilt, but like irresponsibility of not being to participate in the movement, and like having the privilege to be, painting in a studio. I think like it's kind of personally painful thinking about that, and like feeling that I'm not doing enough. So that's sort of how the emotional parts plays into my works that were shown in the show.
Thanks so much, Gabby, for bringing this up and adding to Percy's comments as well as Keen's. I want to maybe follow this up as we transition to take questions from our viewers today. Anyone tuning in, please feel free to leave questions in the chat, and we will get to them for the final part of our event today. But just to speak to Gabby's points a bit further, I see that most of the panelists assembled here have been working, as it were, remotely from the ongoing protests in Hong Kong, right? You've been located in North America, or you've been more or less somehow alienated or abstracted from the ongoing events that seem to be most urgent on the ground in the place where most of you grew up. And I think that this tension, this transnational or diasporic difficulty, it poses potentially a real conflict that is shared among all of the people participating today. And I think that would be maybe something we can take up as we move into this final part of the panel event today. So by way of transition, I'd just like to say we have about 30 minutes or just under for Q&A with the viewers tuning in. And I'd like to remind everyone to send in a question or comment. And in order to do that on YouTube, make sure you are signed into YouTube. You can also send an anonymous question through a Google form link, and you can find this link posted in the chat as well as in the event description on YouTube. We have some questions that were sent in ahead of time, and we can just start with those, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can. And thank you as ever for your patience while we do this live and we're navigating the technology factors. I'd also like to remind you that we welcome all perspectives and viewpoints, but please do keep your comments and questions civil and relevant, short and to the point. And we want to make sure this is a positive experience for everyone participating in the event today. So I'll just remind you to stay respectful of our panelists, artists, and viewers. Okay, so to get started, and panelists, as ever, feel free to jump in. You don't have to be polite with me. I'll just turn to some of the questions coming in. Now, we've all, I think, been living and working remotely. But for many of you, as I was just kind of responding to Gabby, you know, you've been working at a double remove in some cases, having to create work, you know, having to, in some ways, contend with your own experience of what's happening in Hong Kong, but from this North American Art Academy. So I'm wondering, what does it mean to share in an experience of chronic emergency for all of you? And, you know, it's a broad question, but you can feel free to take it up, maybe respond further to this experience of having to work at least one, if not two removes. Yes, and I'll start. Let me turn it over to Winnie.
I will begin by putting in the context of where we are at right now during the pandemic. I think there is a saying in Chinese, and I will say it in Cantonese first. It is 國家自掃門前雪. What it means is when the people only sweep away the snow that landed in front of the entrance of their house so that it doesn't block their pathway, but then they ignore what's happening around them. I think during this time of pandemic, plus what's happening around this chaotic world, a lot of us are staying home and working really remotely. However, it also put us in a situation where that we are very much feeling very detached from the world around us. It's easy to also forget that we are actually interconnected with one another, not only people from our own country or city, it's also for people around us sharing this space. And I think including all the political, social, and cultural context, we are all inseparable from them. So that's why when it comes to facing difficulties, I think that what we should do is to come together instead of drifting away apart from each other. We should be protecting our collective course, not only your personal interest. And we should also be holding each other's hands and not hiding at someone else's back. And I do truly believe that we will gain more strength from one another than just only doing everything and bearing everything by ourselves.
Thank you so much for that, Winnie. Yeah, Caroline.
Hi. I think I can also talk about this as the only one who didn't grow up in Hong Kong, as someone who grew up entirely as a part of the diaspora. I grew up in New York City, Chinatown, and Brooklyn. And I think that situatedness of Hong Kong people and of Chinese people is one that is actually very much diasporic in nature. This is so much a part of our society and our history. And in a time like this, I think for me, that kind of crystallizes both the challenges of it, but also the privilege of that. And kind of as Wenyao mentioned in her sharing, there's a sense of obligation to utilize that unique opportunity, whether it's for cultural reasons or linguistic reasons. As a part of the Hong Kong diaspora, we constantly navigate between cultures and rules of Western society and states and Chinese society, Chinese state. And that mobility is something that is really important to me to contend with. I think in this show and in my own practice, that's something that I've been really trying to examine. It's been very interesting to see the way globally these anti-establishment struggles have been percolating, and the shift from appealing to government entities to this move during lockdown of self-education, to awaken ourselves, to understand each other, to shift that burden from whoever might be in power. It's very easy to think about finding the good guy with a gun, to make that reference. But we know that that doesn't actually work, that I think we can see very clearly what we learn from looking at other movements, including, I think for me very personally, the one in the US for Black liberation, that there is no shortcuts to liberation or to making coalition, to finding connection across identities, that it takes time and we have to learn and co-educate. And so that's something that has been so amazing to see and to really try to participate and challenge each other and ourselves to do that slow, long work in a way that is generative with others that we might not even, whose stories we do not even know necessarily. So in a way, that's part of us kind of trying to throw that out there and see if that can be the way forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caroline, for saying this. I think the slow, long work that you describe, it's something that so many of us can relate to right now, especially right now, like you're saying, when we're cooped up, we have to stay so cautious. And I find that it also poses a really fascinating contrast to the geopolitical spectacle that you were mentioning at the very start of our event, right? Where we have to maintain this personal caution in the face of such spectacle, while at the same time taking on the unending work. I would like to turn to the next question, as I'm aware of the time, and we're having a lot of questions popping up now. One anonymous question that was submitted through the Google form thanks us for the panel discussion and says, I really appreciated the conversation around the difficulty felt creating work responding to Hong Kong while being in Chicago. I was wondering, since the sway of the national security law and other forms of censorship and suppression can manifest at times as an omnipresent threat, at other times as physical violence, how do you strategize your practice against or along such difficulties, collectively or individually? How do these circumstances transform your works specifically?
So I found it a very difficult time, and this is a very difficult question, indeed. As I say in my presentation, I feel that it takes a lot of courage to even speak up something. You know, actually, the slogan that we chant a lot, like "功夫香港時代革命," yay, I speak it. But then people feel so threatened to speak like this. You know, people try to transform this into something really funny with some homophonic words, whatever. Try to make fun from it, but then that's why I say that I can feel the fear in the air. And what I think we need is actually maybe solidarity or mutual support. I've been working, or I've got involved in the artists union, for example. We have a group of artists based in Hong Kong, and we didn't do a lot of like very explicit actions saying that we want to protest against this or that, but then from time to time I feel that this is really important, how we feel that actually we are not alone, and this is really important that we have this spirit, and also at the same time we have to have this strength to overcome the fear. This is not easy, especially when I live in Hong Kong. I'm based in Hong Kong now, and we know that, okay, people really have to fly away from Hong Kong so that he can speak up internationally. And I have never imagined how life would be like this, honestly. And then I don't know how to make it very clearly, like, strategy number 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? But actually, recently I've been reading a lot about the artists in say in Eastern Europe or Russia, how they do art or how they continue to do art under the authoritarian rule. And I try to recall, like, as I say, my friends in mainland China, like my artist friend in mainland China, or even some friends in Burma, they still keep on doing art even when they were in prison. And this is actually something, that's why I keep on asking this question: why are we doing art? Why do we need art? I think this is more important than making or try to how to say it. I think we don't have a textbook to teach us how to do art when we have censorship. We have to be water, right? We have to learn how to be resilient, and we have to learn how to craft our work so that actually we can make fun of it. At the same time, actually, when the secret police come to you, what can you do? Like the example that I cited in my presentation. I think this is something that we have to learn, and I think that things are changing from time to time, and I'm not optimistic, and I'm not so pessimistic at the same time, because I feel that we are not alone. That means that actually it's not only people in Hong Kong. I feel that you guys are here, right? And and we have international support. As I say before, we have this panel. Actually, like we have a like informal chat that I feel that, for example, my friends in Philippines, they feel so desperate about the terrorism law that's been passed as well. But then Hong Kong has been so lucky to have this international attention. I think it's not only about Hong Kong, but I think we have to really open our eyes to see how we can connect ourselves to the international community, not that kind of like neoliberalism or things like that, but actually like how we can connect ourselves to other Asian countries or even Black Lives Matters movement, so that we are not alone. We have to have this strength at heart.
This is perfect. This takes us right to our next questions. And so thank you for your presence, Wen Yao, as ever. And I also just want to throw out a note of appreciation for bringing back the title of the exhibition, Be Water, that refers to, I mean, if you want to talk about it, then not let me, but the aspect of nonviolent resistance that also, I think, carries that notion of perseverance, right? We're forever flexible, but also enduring in this work. And to turn to the issue of international attention, I have a question here from Jean Osberger. The question is on YouTube, and it is, what are the strategic benefits of transnational leftist protests joining forces with each other? What are the shortfalls of such transnational leftist protesters and support? So I'm going to paste this question in our chat so that you can all see it. I think this is a question that many of us have been thinking about, but maybe Sonia, your work with Lausanne might actually also address this. Not to put you on the spot, it's just it occurred to me this might be good.
My thoughts are gonna be pretty chaotic. I'm not usually a morning person. But one thing that really stand out to me when I was listening to Wen Yao or like Percy's response earlier was the Milk Tea Alliance, which some of you might be aware of. So it's like uniting the word for it? Like bring together what is going on in Thailand and Taiwan and like Hong Kong together, and for people, well, not even just protesters, but like for people from these places and other people to like think about these issues collectively, and even other civilians who might not normally look into politics or like want to stay away from it, but like when they see milk tea and they just click onto it and they like might slowly learn more about it. And I feel like with like Hong Kongers being recreated about Be Water, Lennon Wall, like the Pappy memes and like all these bunch of things, like we're still human underneath all these like real political struggles. And there were times where me or like other peers in Lausanne, or like I'm sure a lot of us had experienced this, but we might wonder if we're being performative with platforming all the Hong Kong topics in our art or in our practice or in our work or in our daily conversations. But especially with artists, we take inspirations from our daily life, and that's our reality right now. Like every day, if we're in America or like other places, like places other than Hong Kong, we wake up and like those are all the news that we're reading, and this is what we're facing every day and being bombarded by it one way or another. And then I think it's like very logical that our response being political to the events happening is what outcomes of it. I don't know where I am right now with my thoughts, so I'll hand it back to Jenny. Thanks.
No, that's fabulous. I think there's a great deal of, there's a diversity of views that accompanies this question as to how solidarity gets established, what solidarity looks like when it comes to building these bridges transnationally. and what it means to have a kind of a leftist form of support for the movements that unfold globally, that are anti-establishment, that are often critiques of global capital, and that offer some kind of path toward the resistance to maybe the social and institutional ills perpetuated by such formations. So yeah, what is it that you want to see out of solidarity internationally? But I can also jump to the next question and leave you the option of either addressing this question a step further or turning to something that's a bit more local to some of us. We do have an extra question that is pertaining to the folks at SAIC over the past year. And Natalie Lip has asked, a lot of protesters are, oh, sorry, Anna Olson. We'll get to Natalie's next. Anna Olson's question is, how has the exhibition Be Water, Will They Flow and the community's responses to the exhibition affected you and or your attitudes towards SAIC and your education at SAIC? So would anyone like to take that up? Or you can also continue the discussion from just a moment ago. And I see Winnie. Yes, Winnie.
The first thing, the question that can come to my mind is about how do we think about the word controversy. Controversy is really interesting. It's not because there are more than one party that has a distinctly different view, but it's because each party thought their truth or perceived truth is the truth. Everybody thinks their own realities is real. And in that kind of situation, what it means is there is impossible for anyone to actually paint the whole picture. Nobody would have a so-called complete, balanced, or neutral picture because each one of us see things from our own positionality. And this is particularly true for how we feel, our emotions. Our emotions cannot be balanced or neutral. So I think this is really essential to note that all the way that how we feel and different people feels should always be valid and acknowledged as well. And this will be something that I will continue on to study and understand in my fabulous education at SAIC.
Gabby?
I could add on to that with a more personal perspective. I actually feel really optimistic about like my classmates and the faculty that are really supporting us, and it's more kind of like in person, like person-to-person communication than like us and the institution itself. It's just like communicating with, you know, viewers from like mainland China or domestic students, and just like knowing that there's actually a lot of people supporting what we're doing, even though they might not be able to openly express that, but they would like come to us during the assembly and talk about how they appreciate their show and have very supportive images and text pasted on the London Wall. I think it's very like us as a group, we do feel supported in many ways. And also, of course, SITE has been giving us a lot of help and advice and to make this happen. So I am pretty optimistic about how this community could come together and really bring a kind of even stronger like solidarity.
Thanks so much, Gabby. Now, just keeping an eye on the time, I see that we're getting close to 11:30. I think that in order to cover the last couple of questions that have been shared with me, we can go just a few minutes over time. We won't go beyond 11:35, just to give everybody a chance to say a few words, if you like. So I will share maybe is it all right with you if I share a couple of questions? And you can address what you feel comfortable addressing or what you feel urgency in addressing. So Natalie's question, a lot of protesters are youngsters or teenagers who have suffered mental or even physical stresses throughout this one-year social movement, which is ongoing. What do you want to tell them if you could only say one or two simple sentences? We also have a question from Kyungmook Kim, who thanks us for organizing and making this event possible. And I think Kyungmook would like to push us on sharing thoughts or feelings on the recent situation of Hong Kong and Hong Kongers since the national security law passed. I know that we've talked about anxiety and rage, but if there's anything you'd like to elaborate on with regard to that. And there is a final question that I will share, which you may or may not want to touch, and that pertains to the following. As the separation in terms of political beliefs between folks in Hong Kong and folks in mainland China, how can Hong Kong artists deal with the distrust and hostility from a rather vast Chinese audience? Or is it not necessary to think about this at all for you? So very difficult questions. I'll make this available to you in our little chat here so you can see it. Who'd like to take up one of these? Just in the few minutes we have remaining. Wen Yao, please.
Actually, I teach in Hong Kong, and quite a lot of my students are from mainland China. I always have this dilemma, like, especially last year when we have protests every weekend. And then on Monday, I will see all those Chinese students, and I feel so difficult to tell them what's going on in Hong Kong. But then, kind of like at the end of the semester, one of the students came to me and said, "Wen Yao, I don't want to go back to China." And I said, "What happened?" And then she stopped crying and then tell me the fear she had about like returning China. And then I'm not sure like what's going on indeed and why she suddenly talked to me like this. And I have not been very close to her. But then anyway, I think sometimes I feel that it's really hard to convince people who have totally different mindset. It takes ages to convince them. But then sometimes actually maybe I'm unlucky that kind of like the students who are willing to come to Hong Kong actually and do art, they are a little bit more open-minded. And then I'm not talking about politics in my class, but somehow actually once they came here, they know what's going on, or maybe they can open up themselves to see different things. Actually, they will just try to see things from different perspectives. And what I mean is actually like not try the most difficult thing, that is to convince the totally different people, but actually like maybe you can try and talk to people next to you. Maybe you can change a little bit by little bit. That's how I feel. And some of them are really stubborn, I know, but actually, like as I say, actually I think I do my work for people who have the same belief in freedom. Yeah, but not for people who are trying to deprive us from it. Yeah.
I would like to just very quickly address to Natalie's question. In 3 bullet points, I will tell the teenagers 3 things. 1, whatever you're feeling right now, it is all valid and it is not wrong. 2, As someone who would like to be part of creating a better future, first you have to take care of yourself. So both physically and mentally, when you keep yourself safe, then the world will give you more opportunity to shape it into a better future. Number 3, all the teenagers will sooner become our future generation. So whatever we are doing right now is the kind of world that you will experience in the future. So that's all.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And Kim.
So I guess I want to respond to Kimok. Thanks for the question. My feeling and thought toward the national security law is complicated because what we see in the future, there's a lot of unknown situation. Just like the law, there's unknown. The what is about the law was publicly released, like not it's after they pass the law, like the clear what is gonna happen, and we don't know when we'll we are the artists, we are the troublemaker. We don't know when we will like accidentally step on the bomb and then you did something wrong that's against the law. But I think what I want to say is I try not to censor myself. Even the law is there's just a lot of unknown and scary. I think in general the whole vibe is we are covering this like kind of white cares, kind of like fear. But I think for me it's like I try not to censor myself, but at the same time I don't think we should I think we should have more empathy to other people that feel like that everyone is like having their risk. It's really weird. Like in Hong Kong, like we have the actual risk. There's a price of making work, creating. Everyone's their price different. So I think it's the time that we really need to have some more empathy. Maybe you can risk more, but some people they can. I think it's the time to more inclusive with everyone. I think that's how we to move forward instead like everyone because like there's always like people opinion about let's try not to censor yourself first. But some people they don't agree that. But, I think it's in general it's just more the empathy and show respect. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Keen. I agree that the demand for empathy has become a demand, a political demand at that. And I see that we're at 11:35, tragically, because I know there's so much more to say. This just flew by. I hope for all of you as well. And I sadly have to wrap up the discussion and thank everybody for sharing their questions and thank our panelists for responding so openly. And I'll hand it over to Fran.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. And a special thanks to our wonderful artists and panelists. And I just like to say that Site Galleries is very excited to share more student work and host more programming events such as this one in the upcoming fall term. We will be sharing our exhibition schedule very soon. And if you have any questions about exhibiting your work with us or and getting more involved with Site, please don't hesitate to contact us via email at sitegalleries@saic.edu, or you can also visit our website at sites.saic.edu/sugs. Thank you, everyone. Take care.